So I'm going to share with you a couple of really interesting ideas on the theme of beliefs. But what we're going to look at is question some of the most fundamental beliefs that the world puts in you about success. Because I think some of these beliefs are incredible, but some of these beliefs also create so much drama and fear and feelings of missing out or failure. So I call this presentation The Theory of Extraordinary because I have a book coming out in May, and it's called Code to an Extraordinary Mind. And this is one of the themes that the book explores. But anyway, buy the book in May. For now, pay attention to this. The goal of this presentation is to present an alternative model to success. Remember, everything in the human world right now are belief constructs. So anything that you cannot physically touch is nothing more than a cognitive concept. And because these are cognitive concepts, very often they are not absolute truth. They are relative truth. They are different for different societies and different people. How we in the modern Western world view the world is going to be completely different from the Achuar tribe in the Amazon rainforest, including our definitions of success. So this intangible thing in our head called success, the lack of it or attaining it, means so much to us. But what if it is nothing more than an illusion? So what we want to do here is dismantle this illusion. To dismantle it, I want to share a couple of insights. Why is it that certain people live genuinely extraordinary lives and others are aiming to get there? But it's only a tiny minority. And this tiny minority, their lives don't just seem happy and blissful, but they seem to be so far ahead exponentially of everyone else. They seem to know what their goals are. They seem to be tapped into intuition. They seem to be constantly creating and growing. What makes them unique? This is what I'm going to attempt to answer in this presentation. But first I want to share my story, a story of a false start. So some of you might recognize that home. Does anyone recognize that home? That is Bill Gates' home on Lake Washington in Seattle. That's an aerial view of it. It's this amazing house. And it was 1998, and I was at a barbecue at that home. I'd just been accepted into Microsoft. I'd spent years of my life toiling away to get into the University of Michigan School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. And I did that because as an Indian kid growing up in an Indian family, you have to be a computer engineer or a doctor or anything else that is a profession, or you are a failure. So I decided to study computer engineering, not because I wanted to, but because that was the definition of success based on the belief system of my culture. And I did decent. For whatever reason, Microsoft ended up hiring me. I was one of the top 1% of graduates from computer schools in America that got into Microsoft. And there I was as one of the early employees at Bill Gates' home. And Bill Gates was so gracious. He was the richest man in the world. But there he was, welcoming all of us on that little beach. There were barbecues, there were burgers being on the barbecue. And Bill was just there, like surrounded 3 people deep, with a bunch of interns just waiting to shake his hand and ask him questions and appear to look really intelligent to our new boss. So I was standing there looking at the water. Bill Gates was behind me, and I was thinking, God, I feel so guilty because I'm here in Gates' home, but I hate my job, and I genuinely did. And so what happened was I got myself fired. I had the most incredible job by every definition of success in my culture, based on my school teachers, my parents. I made it. At 21 years old, I had that cushy job at Microsoft. That's equivalent to getting a job at Apple today. Funny, isn't it? But I realized I hated that job. Now, I was too chicken to go up to my boss and tell him I wanted to quit because I just couldn't bring myself to quit. So I got myself fired in the most embarrassing way. I basically played Microsoft's Age of Empires during working hours for hours every day till my boss discovered me and fired me on the spot. So after 11 weeks, my Microsoft journey ended. And I thought, shit, I spent $150,000 plus getting that degree. I got it. I got the #1 job for someone of my degree, and now I lost it. Now, I couldn't get any other job, so I ended up just moving to New York City and working for a nonprofit. Being a nonprofit, they paid me below the poverty line. So I shared an apartment with 2 other guys, a studio apartment with 2 guys. We had our beds, our mattresses. There were no walls, so we had shower curtains. We couldn't afford real curtains, so we had plastic shower curtains dividing our beds. Bringing a girlfriend home for a date was the most awkward, embarrassing situation. But that's how I live, below the poverty line in New York. But through that job, interesting things happened. I met my wife, Christina, through that job. I ended up starting Mind Valley from connections I made through that job. As a result of meeting Christina, we now have 2 kids because of that job. All of this because I walked away from this illusion of this ideal life at Microsoft and took that leap. So I really believe that sometimes you got to take these leaps, especially when you are trapped in a situation that you know you chose, not because your heart told you to go there, but because you were following the belief patterns of your society or your culture or your school or your teachers or your parents. And I believe today in the world, the majority of people are trapped in situations like this. The majority of Americans today, in a recent poll, dislike their jobs. How can that be? We spend 70% of our waking hours at work, but the majority of Americans, one of the richest countries in the world, dislike their jobs today. That's a tragedy. So what is up with our culture, our schooling system, that makes adults grow up and spend 70% of their waking hours, precious lifetimes, in things which give them no meaning? And why do we hesitate to walk away from this? So I want to share a couple of ideas with you to try to attempt to show perhaps alternative belief systems that might help us end this grand delusion. So the first is, we've been taught all our lives that there's a particular path for us. Study, get good grades, graduate, apply to a college, take a loan, go into college, go into student debt, graduate, get good grades, maybe get a master's degree, send out your resume to a bunch of companies, keeping your fingers crossed that one will hire you, and so on and so on and so on. But it doesn't stop. You then work from 9 to 5, you save, you slave, so that someday you can retire and then really enjoy life. Now, if you think that's just for career people, not me, I'm an entrepreneur, it's really similar. Think about the rules about being an entrepreneur. The fact of the world today is that most entrepreneurs are stressed out. They're not making as much as they want. All they have done is exchanged the idea of a 9 to 5 job with another situation where now they are still earning a paycheck which is mediocre, but now they have all that risk. For my first 5 years as an entrepreneur, I calculated that I was poorer off than if I had just stuck with a regular corporate job for the first 5 years. And many entrepreneurs are like that. Now, I believe the reason for this is that modern goal setting leads us astray. Why? Well, one of the ideas terms I coined is the word brule. A brule is a bullshit rule. Our society creates bullshit rules all the time because bullshit rules are designed to help us make meaning, to simplify our understanding of the world. So all of these rules that we often live by, some of them are valid, but most of them are nothing more than rules. Bullshit rules come from religion, come from culture, come from education, come from politics, come from media. They are all around us, yet we follow them. Let's look at some really dumb rules for careers. So let's take this fact. 50% plus of Americans dislike their jobs, right? Now let's look at this other interesting thing. There's this phenomenon in America right now where people become lawyers. Anyone here who's a lawyer, please raise your hand. Okay. So there are some lawyers who absolutely love their jobs, but there's a unique thing in America. America has 5% of the world's population, 70% of the world's lawyers. I know because I used to work in the legal industry. Yet, 50% of lawyers, particularly women lawyers, are clinically depressed. Why are so many Americans jumping into a field that leads to depression? I had one friend, his name is Gavin, and he told me he studied law for 5 years, and he decided to quit just before graduation, because in that one of the final lectures of the semester, his professor said, and I want you to know that you're going to go out there, you're going to be practicing law, but know that you will face depression. Deal with it. And Gavin decided, no. And he walked out, and he became a writer. And I've seen this so many times. When I was selling technology to law firms, I would have lawyers break down and cry to me on the phone about how miserable their lives were. In fact, we were trained to then use this as a lever to push their buttons to buy that technology. That's why I quit the job. It's a crazy, messed up world. Now, I'm not saying we don't need lawyers. We do, but certainly not the number that we have right now. Now, there are rules about entrepreneurship too, which I think are often bullshit. Many entrepreneurs I know are nothing more than glorified freelancers. They work from home, they are bored, they are lonely, they are under high stress, because if they don't get that next client, no one is paying them a steady salary. Entrepreneurs are often also absolutely miserable. So I think that we need to rewrite some of these fundamental rules that we use to pursue success in our lives and that we use to train our kids. And what I want to share is just 5 ideas for rewriting the rules of success. This is the conversation I would have with my son Hayden if he was old enough to be interested in this conversation compared to Angry Birds on his iPad. Rule number 1 is this. The most important thing I believe that leads to success is pursuing what I call a mission-oriented life. So first, let me dispel a couple of myths, okay, and share 3 simple secrets. Success has nothing to do with your career. Having a great career has little correlation with success. Success is not about joining the family business. In many Asian cultures, it's about getting into your family business. Not true. Success is not about being an entrepreneur or having a business. You do not have to be an entrepreneur. One of the most interesting feedback I get from my speeches recently to college students is that they come up to me going, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you told me I don't have to be an entrepreneur. Everybody else keeps telling me I need to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to. You gave me permission to not do it." Being an entrepreneur is another bullshit rule. It's a means goal, not an end goal. So then what is success? I believe it's this. The most extraordinary people in the world do not have a career or a business. What they have is a mission. They have a mission that gives them a particular meaning, that fuels them in terms of what they want to do in the world. They are not about a job. They are not about a career. They are obsessed instead with something bigger. That's something we call the mission. I had a chance once to meet Elon Musk. It was part of the X Prize Foundation, and we got to visit SpaceX. So that was the actual meeting that happened in the room. And I got to ask Elon Musk, who's my favorite entrepreneur in the world today, a very important question. The question was, Elon, if I could take you and put you in a blender and then blend you and distill the essence of Elon Musk, what would that essence be? And when he got up with the fact that I just asked a question about murdering him, he said this. He said, well, so these are actual photographs from that meeting. He said, well, now he went into a bit of a tangent, but the essence of the answer was essentially this response. He said, look, I graduated, I was trying to figure out what to do, and I thought the internet sounds really exciting, so I decided I wanted to go get a job at Netscape. So he sat down at the reception office in Netscape, holding his resume in his hand, and he knew Netscape was building the new browser, Mozilla. Sounded really cool. He wanted to be a part of that. And he waited, and he waited, and he waited. And because he was a geek, he didn't have the balls to get up and go and actually approach the receptionist and ask for a meeting. He just waited, assuming someone would come and talk to him. And he said, nobody came and spoke to me, so I said, fuck it, I'll just start my own company. And Elon Musk went on, and he started a company which he sold, then he started PayPal, then he started SpaceX, then he started Tesla. And now he's probably the world's most significant entrepreneur because nobody picked him up from that receptionist office. But that isn't the point. The point is this. When I asked Elon, what is your essence? He said this. He said, I believe man should be an interplanetary species. I believe that the essence of the American dream is to explore. And I believe that we should have a colony on Mars. He said he decided that it would be incredible if we colonized Mars, so he decided to go to NASA's website and see what NASA was doing about it. And he saw that NASA had nothing about their plans to colonize Mars on their website. He said, first I thought, boy, NASA really has a shitty website that they don't update. Then he realized, no, NASA is shitty. It's not doing anything to make us an interplanetary species. I bet I could do that. And the next thing you know, he ended up revolutionizing battery technology, building an electric car to help preserve our environment, then building the replacement to the space shuttle. In 2008, I believe, NASA finally decommissioned the space shuttle. Today, NASA payloads are taken to space by Elon Musk's SpaceX. But Elon Musk didn't say what drove him was SpaceX or Tesla. What drove him was that. It was this crazy, obsessive mission with helping mankind become an interplanetary species. And this is something I found with really extraordinary thinkers. They dream big. And because they dream big, the other problems become small for them. They're obsessed with this one crazy idea. It's almost a mad obsession, but it gives them a fuel. It makes them excited about life. They do not have jobs. Rather, they have this grand mission that they have to pursue because it gives them a form of meaning. Now, that meaning gives them incredible resilience and fuel. Do you know Elon Musk, when he sold his shares in PayPal, he was PayPal's biggest shareholder. So he made something like $220 million. He decided to gamble all that money on building rockets. His first rocket exploded. His second rocket blew up. His third rocket failed. And then he was down to $20 million left. He had one more shot at a rocket. He knew that if this final rocket exploded, and odds were it will, because until then, only nations could put rockets in space, not private individuals. He knew he was going to lose everything. His experimental car company, Tesla, SpaceX, and all his savings. He was so broke that he could not afford rent. He told us that he had to ask his friend Adeo Ressi, one of the early co-founders of PayPal, if he could sleep on Adeo's couch, because he, Elon Musk, as recently as 7 years ago, could not afford rent. That Ford rocket would either destroy everything he owned or make him a genius. And of course, we know what happened. That Ford rocket took off. On December, I believe it was December 2010, I may have the dates wrong, after that Ford rocket took off, Elon Musk, who had no money for rent, signed a $1 billion contract with NASA. Isn't that incredible? But the point isn't the contract. The point is that mission gives you a resilience so that you can lose all your money, but still want to try one last time with that 20 million because that vision is so important to you. And I think that's one of the most incredible ways to live. Now, we all can't be Elon Musk. He's, of course, the number one, arguably, entrepreneur in the world today. But we can live like this lady, Kalyani Kona. I was speaking in India a few months back, and Kalyani was the lady miking me up. So we started talking, and I asked her, what do you do? And she says, well, I'm working on an app, and that app is to help disabled people in India find love. So I asked Kalyani, oh, that's really interesting, tell me about it. She said, there are 80 million disabled people in the world, right? That slide is wrong. It should be 80 million in the world, 20 million in India. And of this 20 million disabled people in India, Kalyani had found that only 5% of them ever get married because they are blind, or they are deaf, or they can't walk. They don't have the same opportunities to meet the love of their life as we all do. So Kalyani decided she wanted to make an app to help disabled people find love. Isn't that beautiful? So she put up her app on Wishberry, which is like a Kickstarter for India, got funding, the government jumped in. She said, it was amazing, all these doors opened for me, and that app is now becoming a reality. So as she was miking me up, I filmed her for 30 seconds on my iPhone. I just want to share with you what she said. Well, let me preface that, right? I asked her, isn't it scary? You're like in your early 20s. You could be getting a job. Anyone would hire you. You're brilliant. But you want to gamble on this thing where you don't even know if you'll make any money because you want to help disabled people find love. This is what she said. Isn't it scary?
It's very, very scary, but okay.
You can say it.
It's super scary, but if I have the opportunity to make a change and I have to do it, then I'd rather bring that change with the opportunities I've got rather than sitting in front of my laptop trying to, do something which is being allocated to me.
I love her response. If I can make a change, I'd rather make that change than sit in front of my laptop and do something which has been allocated to me. Allocated to you. That's how most of us live our lives, don't we? That's how we tell our kids to live our lives. Do what is allocated to you, which is pursue the traditional 9 to 5, the traditional rules of modern society. See, the problem with most people is that their problems aren't big enough. Unlike Kalyani or unlike Elon, they're worried about putting on a little bit of fat, or that guy who won't text them back after that date. But people with a mission, the little stuff, doesn't bother them. They have bigger problems. Their problems are helping disabled people find love, making mankind an interplanetary species, changing the education system. That's where I believe we need to train people to gravitate to. And I believe that should be the new definition of success. The question, though, is how do we get started? Well, here's something I think is true. Do not ask your kids, do not ask yourself, what do you want to be? Instead, ask this question. Now, I learned this question from a business coach called Martin Rutt, and it's a beautiful question. I think it's the most powerful question we can ask people today. And the question is simply, what is your vision of paradise on earth? What is your vision of paradise on earth? Rather than ask your child, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he'll say the usual stuff, astronaut, lawyer, doctor. Instead, ask him, what's your vision of paradise on earth? What is that one thing that really captivates you, that you would love to see more of in the world today? Now, the United Nations, back on that same trip to India, I was traveling to the airport in Delhi, and I was sharing a taxi with a guy from the United Nations whom I had just met, and he was responsible for the UN My World survey, really interesting survey. Now, that survey basically surveyed 8 million people in the world to find out what people cared about. And you can see, right up front is education. Education was number one. Second is better healthcare. Third is better job opportunities. Fourth is an honest and responsive government. I love this survey because this survey gives you so many ideas of what we can do to make heaven on earth. Education, better healthcare, better, more transparent government, clean water for all. And this is where I think we should be steering people today. Rather than traditional careers or traditional jobs or entrepreneurship, instead simply think, what is that mission that I could have that can push humanity forward? Business people you see do it for the dollars. Real entrepreneurs, they do it to elevate the human race. Now, there's more to it though. Not only does a mission give you happiness, but it seems to magnify your ability to stay productive in your work. Gallup did a study in 1958, found that men who retire at 80, 86% kept working because their job was fun. 93% kept working because they found their job meaningful. When we take on a larger mission, it gives us meaning. And meaning is one of the most incredible fuels that we can have in life. I told you that I started Awesomeness Fest, and I loved A-Fest because it gave me meaning. Same thing over here. Meaning gives you fuel. It makes you resilient to failure, and it makes what you do so much more than just 9-to-5 drudgery. But there's a second rule. Now, that second rule is really important, and this is another belief that I think we need to break. And that belief is stop distinguishing between entrepreneurs or employees. A-Fest used to be an entrepreneurship conference, not anymore, because we found that many of the most incredible people in the world were not entrepreneurs. They were employees. Barack Obama is an employee. Many of the people who win Nobel Prizes are employees. There seems to be this false dichotomy where we tell people they need to be entrepreneurs. And I think that's good in some ways, but when you understand that it's not about entrepreneurship or employee, rather it's about this. This is a better definition. And it comes from Amy Wrzesnowski, who's a professor of organizational behavior at Yale. And it says this, right? There are 3 different things: a job, a career, a calling. Being an employee or an entrepreneur could be in any of those 3 things. A job is what pays the bill. If you are employed in a job that you hate, but it's paying the bill, that's a job. If you are an entrepreneur and you're doing it and you're really stressed out and you don't enjoy it, but it's paying the bills, it's still a job. But you can go one step above. You can go one step above a job to a career. A career gives you upward mobility. It gives you a way to hone your skills. You can do that as an employee or an entrepreneur. But the level beyond that is a calling. A calling is where you're doing this even if you wouldn't be paid for it, because it gives you meaning. And often with a calling, it's really hard to describe, but it speaks to your heart, it speaks to your soul. You can be in your calling, whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur. And that's why I don't like that distinction. Instead, what I think we should encourage people to do is to aim to find that calling as fast as they can. Now, this brings us to rule number 3. Not all paths are equal. And this applies again to entrepreneurs or employees. This is another belief that I think we need to defragment and bust in the world today. See, there are 2 kinds of companies. humanity plus or humanity minus. And I want to be very firm about this. Both these companies serve a very different purpose in the world. A humanity minus company holds us back as the human race. In the worst cases, they actually drag us down. Fossil fuel companies are necessary today because the world is powered by fossil fuels, but it's humanity minus. Alternative energy, humanity plus. Companies like McDonald's that sell junk food, humanity minus. Companies that are encouraging people to eat healthy are humanity plus. You want to make sure that no matter what you do, no matter what your kids do, they find meaning in a humanity plus company. Every single day, we have a choice. We can choose to work for a humanity minus company or humanity plus company. I think we have to stop tolerating humanity minus companies. I know they are necessary in the world today, but they shouldn't be the ones which are able to get the best graduates. America's smartest people shouldn't be working for Coca-Cola or Philip Morris. They need to be working for SpaceX, for Google, for companies which are actually elevating the human race. There's a term which I like called Craptastic, and I want to teach you this word. A large number of jobs exist solely to make crap sound fantastic. We call this craptastic work. Think about that. A large number of jobs fail to add meaning to their employees' lives, fail to add meaning to the people who own those companies. They exist purely for craptastic work. In other words, manufactured demand. They tell you that high fructose corn syrup packaged as happiness in a can is amazing, and it makes the world unite and sing and skip. But it's bullshit. Now, the thing is, we don't openly talk about this because these companies also fund many, many amazing things. But if you work for such a company, my advice would be find a way to steer these companies towards more meaningful work. There are people in Coca-Cola, for example, who are working to make Coca-Cola take its giant distribution arm and use it to distribute clean water to villages in India instead of high fructose corn syrup. So there's this really interesting thing that happens when you get trapped by a company that's humanity minus. You fall into the cognitive dissonance of craptastic work. One of my friends is one of the smartest men in Silicon Valley, and he runs a think tank where companies come to him to brainstorm new ways to grow their brand. And he told me an interesting story. A cola company, I won't say which one, came to him and said, "We need your help." And he goes, "Great, let me know how I can help." And they go, "We need to figure out how to make more teenagers drink our drink because sales are falling." And he said, "You do realize, right, that your drink promotes diabetes?" And they go, "Nope, we funded multiple studies that show that our drink does not contribute to diabetes." And he said he was shocked. In his own words, he said he turned down that job. They were willing to pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars to run an innovation think tank to figure out how to get their quota diabetes. He turned them down because he is a mission-oriented person. He will not tolerate working for any company that he believes is humanity minus. But he said this was really interesting. The employees of that company were good, otherwise wonderful human beings, but they had fooled themselves, convinced themselves that what they were peddling did not contribute to obesity. Because if they admit that, they are also admitting that they are working in a job that is doing that's humanity minus, and that becomes really hard. So we need to stop doing this in the first place. Most graduates today randomly send out their resumes to companies hoping for that job as an accountant, or that job as a lawyer, or that job as a marketing manager. But remember, what you're accounting for, or what company you're representing as a lawyer, or what company you're marketing, it's not about that particular role. It has to correspond to a greater meaning. So what I'm trying to say is, when we're picking our careers or starting companies, we don't have to save the world, but we have to stop messing it up for the next generation. And that leads to rule 4. This sounds very high, pie in the sky, but it isn't easy, and it's not meant to be easy. There's a great book out called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And this book says, compelling careers often have complex origins that reject the simple idea that all you have to do is follow your passion. So I'm not saying follow your passion. Following your passion actually becomes really dangerous. If you ask a kid, a teenager, what's your passion? Or a high schooler, what's your passion? They're going to say, oh, I love music, I love baseball, I love sports. Isn't really a way to forge a career. Instead, what Cal Newport says is, it's a tough journey, but go out and experiment. It's about working hard, trying different things. And as you do that, often that thing that you're trying becomes your passion. Many people, for example, who join Mindvalley are not necessarily passionate about education. They come in because it's a job and they know that the company is Humanity Plus, but when they are in that job, they start falling in love with the mission. And then it becomes their mission. And that's when they find their passion. Take, for example, my career. Okay, this is my life flopping around. Stage actor, dishwasher, stagehand, theater troupe director, Java programmer, photojournalist, Microsoft, vice president of a non-profit, unemployed. Okay, that's all the way till 24. Nothing there would predict that I'd be doing what I do right now. But it gets even worse. B2B salesman, then unemployed again. Phone sales, director of sales, meditation instructor. I don't know how I made that leap. Home-based entrepreneur, startup founder, and then CEO. I basically did what Carl Newport said many people who have amazing jobs do, experimented. I don't think I was born to do what I did. I think I discovered it by experimenting, by moving around, by not being afraid to jump when I felt that my work was meaningless to me, but constantly searching for something that gave me meaning. And finally, I found that in the form of meditation. Then that expanded meaning further to education. And that's what I do right now. But the important thing is, it did take me a pretty long time. Specifically, it took me 8 years. 8 years to actually find meaning in my work. Now, the interesting thing though is, we've been told that you're supposed to be a successful entrepreneur in your 20s. It's called the Mark Zuckerberg effect. Most successful .com entrepreneurs are in their 20s. Not true. Actually, the average age of successful entrepreneurs, according to 1VC, is 38. Are you under 38? Raise your hand. Awesome. You're not going to be successful. Hold out a couple of years. No, I'm kidding. You might be. But the thing is, you don't have to have that expectation. We place this false expectation that you're meant to make it big, be a millionaire. Striking it up when you're 40 is going to be hard. Not true. Today, by the way, a guy became the richest man in the world. He's the founder of Zara. I forgot his name, but he's a Spanish entrepreneur. Today, Bill Gates was dethroned as the richest man in the world. It was in news today because Zara's price, which is a Spanish clothing company, soared. Now, that dude started Zara at the age of 40. That's pretty incredible, right? So the thing is, the average age of success is way higher. I believe between the ages of 20 to 38, we are meant to be flopping around, trying to figure out what is that thing that gives us meaning. Now, a word of warning. As you try to do this, as you try to pursue a job that gives you meaning, you will be going against traditional advice. You'll be going against the grain. And I was in India. This was a different event. And I was speaking to 1,000 entrepreneurs in India. And the guy, one of the people who brought me there, who was helping me get on stage and everything, I asked him, his name was Anush, I asked him, Anush, what advice do you think I should share with Indian entrepreneurs? I'm used to talking to American entrepreneurs, but not so much Indian. What do you think is a profound piece of advice I should share with them? And he said, tell them they do not have to join the family business. And I realized, wow, in India, there's this belief system that to be successful, you have to take over your father's business. But many people end up taking over that business and then being miserable because what spoke to their father does not speak to them. But in Asian culture, that was expected. So I got on stage in India and I said this, and I said, you know, the human heart, they say, is the most selfish organ in the human body because it takes all the good blood for itself, all the rich, oxygenated good blood. Then it takes all that other blood and it pumps it out to all the other organs, the liver, the lungs, the kidneys. And some might therefore say the heart is the selfish organ. But the thing is, if the heart did not take the good blood for itself, the heart would die. And if the heart died, every other organ would die with it. So some might say the heart has to be selfish for self-preservation. And likewise, I would encourage you to be selfish, to choose work, to choose a job that speaks to your heart and not your father's heart or your parents' heart or your family's heart. You have to put your heart first. And the crowd freaking loved it because we busted a rule of Indian society. Now, many of you might recognize this. People will tell you, you can't do that, but we paid for your education. You can't do that. You got that great GPA. You got that certificate from that bullshit university. You got to put your heart first. Now, the second thing is something I learned from Salma Isadora. What Salm said at A-Fest last year, we were talking and she said, you know, Sometimes people will tell you, oh, what you're doing is dishonoring the family. You know, what you're doing is not right. But really what they're saying is, look at me. I'm better than you because my chains are bigger. Remember that. So it won't be easy. People will talk you out of it, but again, I think it's really important that you do what speaks to you. Now, let's talk about making that leap, right? How do you make that leap, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an employee? How do you make that leap towards finding meaningful work? A really interesting model that I like is MLI, minimum livable income. So Elon Musk was giving an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Neil deGrasse Tyson was asking Elon about his career and such, and Elon Musk said one of the things he did when he was young was he experimented with living on $1 a day. He realized that in America, now he was from South Africa, and he realized that in America, you could go to large wholesale stores like Walmart, buy everything in bulk, and you could survive on $1 a day as a student. And he said when he discovered that he could live on $1 a day, all fear disappeared because he knew he could survive, and that gave him permission to tackle bigger goals. When I started Mind Valley, I did a similar exercise. I figured out that I could survive on $4,000 a month with my wife in New York. And so I quit my job that was paying me double that, $8,000 a month, quit my job and became a meditation instructor, knowing that all I had to make was $4,000 a month. When I hit $4,000 a month in basic income, quit my job and did what gave me meaning. But the interesting thing that happens is, even though you take a personal dip, when you pursue what gives you meaning, over time, things accelerate. Because unlike a regular job, you're not walking uphill. You love every moment of what you do. You're passionate about it. Thus, you grow more. You grow your career more. You're able to make more impact. So it's painful when you say no to whatever you're doing. That is the regular career move. And it might be painful to move into your new thing. But when you do, your speed of growth accelerates. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't quit my job, cut my salary in half. But I could only do it because I was safe. I knew my minimum livable income. Now, the final rule is be unrealistic. So, realism, according to a famous blogger, is it's nothing more than a socially acceptable form of pessimism. The people with the most consistent track records of success don't think in terms of what is, they think in terms of what could be. So, it's important to get unreal when you're pursuing something with meaning. And I'll tell you why. Very often, we fail to set big goals because we believe that we need to look at where we are and then figure out the steps we have to take to get to that big goal, right? But in the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill says, don't do it that way. Set big goals, but then all you got to do is take baby steps. You don't have to know exactly how to get there. You start by taking a simple baby step. So this is probably not going to happen. From where you are right now, you're not going to find a straight path to your unrealistic goal. Rather, Napoleon Hill says, look, you want to start a business, you don't know what to do, go ahead and just register a business name. That's a baby step. But when you take these baby steps, you start showing intention. When you start showing intention, the universe starts guiding you towards that final goal. So in reality, it looks like this. You take a baby step, it may be in the wrong direction, you continue, but then you autocorrect. And sure, you waste some time, but as you keep autocorrecting, you start moving towards that bold, unrealistic goal. Now, Larry Page says something else which is really interesting. He talks about the power of moonshots. A moonshot is a goal that is so unrealistic that most people will say that you're going to fail. But Larry Page said that moonshots are actually really, really, really important because when you take a moonshot, you end up discovering opportunities for innovation that everyone else forget. When you pick a goal that's so unrealistic, like trying to build a school for 1 billion people or colonizing Mars, what happens is you start stumbling upon innovations that no one else is looking at. Elon Musk wasn't trying to build a company to replace the space shuttle. He was trying to colonize Mars. But in that process, he had to pioneer on rocket technology that he then got to monetize. I'm trying to build a school to put 1 billion people through new forms of education. I experimented with live events. Awesomeness Fest was the result. When you pursue those moonshots, you end up innovating in areas that other people are not looking at. And that's why I believe moonshots and being unrealistic are very, very, very important. If you overlay Larry Page's ideas, it looks like that. As you take those missteps, you also discover gold mines, aha moments that other people might not be looking at. So how do you dream big? Really simple exercise. What would you do if you knew you would succeed and had a decade to pull it off? When most of us think of our goals, we tend to think of 1 year. But there's a very interesting study on goal setting, on 1 year versus 10-year goals. And the study shows that all of us overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we profoundly underestimate what we can do in 10 years. So all you got to do is think 10 years. All my goals are 10 years. And when you think 10 years, you give yourself opportunity to be unrealistic. And this is really what I'm trying to advocate here. Find something with meaning. Stretch yourself. Be unrealistic. And that gives you the fuel to live a far more fulfilling life, a far more extraordinary life than most people. But there are a couple of really interesting secret edges that you get when you follow this advice. One is something that I got to ask Branson about. I asked him, if you could break it all down to one thing, all your success, 8 companies in 8 different industries, all valued at $1 billion each, what would it be? And Branson said this: it's all about finding and hiring people smarter than you, getting them to join your business, giving them good work, then getting out of the way, and trusting them. You have to get out of the way so you can focus on the bigger vision. That's important. And here's the main thing. You must make them see their work as a mission. That was a really interesting idea. Mission. You see, when you have a mission, when people see your work as something you're doing because it is a mission, you get instant charisma. This is the secret edge. And it's something that many people don't realize. It attracts people to you. It attracts money. It attracts partnerships. It attracts clients and customers. And this is another reason why you want to pursue mission rather than traditional entrepreneurship or career. The reason why I'm able to get so many great people at Mindvalley is because of that mission. But there's another edge, which is also really beautiful. Think back to that girl, Kalyani Kona, that I shared. She wants to build an app to help disabled people find love. Now, what if her app fails? Does she fail? No, because the mission is so much greater than any single business idea. She simply finds a different business idea. My mission was education. Many of my first business ideas in education completely failed, like fundamentally failed. I lost money. I did not feel like a failure because when you're motivated by a mission, you have multiple options to get there. So you can move, you can maneuver, you can find different paths to get to that mission. And that's the second secret edge. So choose a path that lets you be extraordinary. And when you can do this, what happens is that you get so much more meaning and happiness in your life. And I really want to encourage you to question some of the rules of society that tell you about traditional ways that you're meant to pursue work and career. Thank you.